Good Shabbos. This week we read Parshas Devarim, but this Shabbos is also the day of Tisha B'Av. The ninth day of Av falls out on Shabbos this year. We don't commemorate the destruction of the first and second temple in Jerusalem until Sunday, because on Shabbos we don't fast and we don't have mourning. But I think it's important for all of us to understand that this is Tisha B'Av, and we could start learning the lessons of Tisha B'Av that our sages in the Talmud have taught us. And the question is, what is that lesson? Now, if you're a historian, you could talk about the story about the Romans and how there was a rebellion of the Jews and the Romans fought and destroyed the temple and how cruel the Romans were. And you might also dig a little deeper and understand that the Jews caused it by themselves because there was fighting within their own Jewish nation. There was brother against brother, family against family, one faction against another faction. Those are all important lessons that we can learn from the history of how the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple occurred. But the question we always have to ask ourselves is, what could we do on a small level, on an individual basis? And for that, our sages really came up with some beautiful ideas, because hundreds of years after the destruction of the temple, the Talmud, when telling the story, doesn't focus on the large picture, although it mentions the large picture. It starts off with a story that's probably created by the rabbis of the Talmud about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Basically, we have a story of a man who's making a party, and he invites a fellow Kamsa, but his assistant invites by mistake Bar Kamsa. Kamsa is his friend, Bar Kamsa is his enemy, and when Bar Kamsa comes to the feast, to the party, the man who is giving the party kicks him out, even though he begs him that he should be able to stay, and he'll even pay for the whole feast. He kicks him out. The rabbis who are sitting there do not protest. This fellow goes to the Roman governor and says that the Jews are rebelling, and from there leads to the destruction of the temple. That's a very big oversimplification from a historical point of view, and whether this particular story happened or not is really irrelevant. What the rabbis are trying to say is they're trying to give a story which tells you something which we could do on our own level. In another place in the Talmud, they tell us that the second temple was destroyed because of sinas chinam, because of unnecessary hatred. And again, from a historical point of view, it's because there were huge factions, literally Jews killing each other. That's real terrible hatred. But when the Talmud tells the story, it tells the story of just one person and how he treated his fellow human being and how society in general was reacting to the treatment of this fellow Bar Kamsa. And we start to understand that the large problems of society start, and the seed of those problems and the cause of the ultimate destruction of Jerusalem and the temple is because of the small things that we do in our own family, in our own community. And the names Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, as others have pointed out, comes probably from the word kamitza. Kamitza is what is done when you bring a meal offering and you separate the flour that you're going to put on the altar and burn and the flour that you could eat. And in a sense, what it's saying is these people, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, represent separation, isolation, the ability to only look at yourself and not see others. And when it tells us that this fellow had a friend Kamsa and his other fellow was not his friend, it says call him a Bar Plukta, he was like the enemy, it doesn't tell us what the fight was about. And I think the answer is it doesn't matter what the fight was about. And we all know that. Sometimes once we get into our heads that somebody we don't like, somebody who is different than us, someone who is of a different race, religion, or a different philosophy, even within the Jewish people, those are people we don't want to have anything to do with. And we stop understanding where they're coming from. And I think it's a very, very simple lesson. And it's not one that we all know we should learn, but we have a problem on learning it. we have a problem really taking this and running with it. Because what happens is, no matter how much we think that we're supposed to be sympathetic and empathetic and understand other people's plight, when we see somebody else who doesn't look like us, or doesn't act like us, or doesn't think like us, we automatically think of them as the other, and we are not sympathetic to their plight. When this Bar Kamsa came to the feast, the fellow could have said, what if the tables were turned? What if it was me? How embarrassed would I be? Can I swallow all the the issues that I have right now and forget about my ego, forget about the fact that I'm looking at someone who I don't necessarily like, and be able to just say, look away and say, I have to care about what that fellow's going through. And that's not only true about someone who you don't like, but someone who might have done something wrong and that we feel is unbelievably wrong. We would never do such a thing. But we always have to realize that none of us are perfect. None of us are completely above having any struggles in life. And we just have to understand that somebody else has other struggles. It could be on many, many levels. There's many things that most of us would never dream of doing. But we should understand that where we have our point, where we have our struggles and other things in our life we've already settled and we know where we're going and how we're going to act, then it becomes easy. But the point where we struggle, we expect other people to understand that's our struggle. We have to look at other people that way. Again, it's a very simple lesson. And the rabbis in Pirkei Avos and Ethics of Our Fathers teach us, do not judge your friend until you're in his place. And I think we should add on that. We might not ever be in that fellow's place. So you could just say, well, let's not judge him at all. But not judging is maybe not enough. Not judging is saying, we just want to have nothing to do with him. We can't call him a rasha, a wicked person, but we're not going to befriend them. But maybe we should take it a step further and say, we could understand what he's going. We are in his shoes because we don't struggle with that particular issue, but we struggle with other issues. And it's not so hard for us to imagine that we might have those other struggles. Whether that fellow is an alcoholic, a drug addict, and even someone a criminal. If we were in those shoes, if we were raised like them, if we came from where they came from, if we had those experiences, how would we react? Can we say for sure and with confidence that we would never give in to the temptations that others have given in? Sometimes we might, but there's always some struggle that we have, however small or large, that we could use as a way to be empathetic to other people. And if the fellow who was giving the party had some sympathy, then things wouldn't get out of hand. If the rabbis and the leaders of the community were understanding that somebody else is suffering and is embarrassed and stood up and said, hey, we can't act this way, society would take a different turn. And perhaps we wouldn't have lost Jerusalem. Perhaps the temple wouldn't have been destroyed. Again, we never know for sure. But we have to look at ourselves critically. And it's always easier with hindsight. We're not trying to say exactly what happened. We'll leave that to the historians. What we have to do is look for an area which we could have self-improvement, something that we could do to further our society, to further ourselves, to further the beauty of our community, to make sure that we have a unified community. And it's just not a community in a small sense. It's the Jewish people at large and just being part of the human species. We have to look at everybody and understand that it could be us. Do not judge someone until you're in their place, and judge someone else as if it's your own struggle. And hopefully, with that in mind, if we move that way on an individual basis, we could take that and we can grow that into something greater, and we will have more peace in our own lives, in our community, and hopefully the temple one day will be rebuilt in the sense not just to build a temple, but to build a place where we could focus on our own unity and our own sense of serving God, that the whole world, as I always say, the verse that we end off, Aleinu Bayomahu, on that day, Hashem Echad, God will be one, Ushmo Echad, and his name will be one. We all worship the same God. We all worship the same principles. We all will hold of the same morality. And that will be the time of Mashiach, the messianic times that we all dream for. Good Shabbos.